it in the keys? The fingertips that reach out to touch them? The string that begs to be bent? Or is it in the notes on a page? A foot to a pedal? The infinite space between imagination and skill? Or is it simply music?
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the 13th Node podcast, Art of Mastery. And this is going to be a special, very fun podcast. I have someone very unique, very special. He is a recognized artist, author, astrologer, healer, and an educator. The things that I've learned just from hearing on him on podcasts has been incredible. This is George H. Lewis, everyone. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very well, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me on today.
I'm so thankful and grateful that I discovered and found you on a podcast one day. And I heard you speak, and then I started listening to more of your podcasts, and I just knew we need to understand the mastery that you have developed for yourself. And with that, this episode is geared for the mastery of the inner self. And with that, I know that let's just start with distinctively the last podcast I heard you on. You were speaking with Nino Rodriguez and Laura Eisenhower about, at this time, this tribulation and this craziness that we're having in the world. We are talking about refining and looking within self. So with that message, can we start with just how did you even get to the place, and how were you as a child developing in your formative years to even have the kind of the aptitude and the wisdom to go down this path?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when I got your first email, it piqued my interest because of the 13th note, the concept of the 13th note. 13 has always been the alchemical number because it is the alchemical effect of the 12. The 12 zodiac signs, the 12 months of the year. If you know the secrets of the universe, 369, 12 comes up to 3. It's something very interesting. So music was such a profound thing for me throughout my life. I was a chorister at school. I often tell this story, forgive me if you've already heard it, but I was at one of these very tough English boarding schools, and it wasn't easy, but music was my solace. And as a chorister, I had access to the church bells. And yes, we still did have a church bell or two in the chapel. And I would literally, and I was an 8-year-old boy, I would grab them up and take them and gong them. And we would literally bathe ourselves in this frequency and sound. I knew nothing about frequency. I knew nothing about Tesla's 0-point energy and healing, but I did it intuitively and innately, and we all loved it. And I think in a way that musical moment and those musical moments, I mean, another example would be at my next school at 13 to 18, another boarding school, which I absolutely detested. I was very, very unhappy at that school. Music was the place that I would go to, and I remember learning every single Enya piece, and Enya as a 13, 14-year-old boy, it would just take me, and I'd play it on the organ as well, and I'd do my own versions of it, and it would just take me into the inner realm. And I downloaded, I read, my French was good at that time. I read the entire quatrains of Nostradamus. And obviously, subsequently, I realized Nostradamus is not necessarily working for the light side. But that's another conversation. I was very interested in that esoteric inner journey as a young boy, definitely. And partly because of the pain that was around me.
Wow. And being in a boarding school, this is a family decision. I'm assuming that, whatever dynamic that you were brought up in, that Was this a family thing that everybody went to boarding school in your family?
Yeah,
Or
to be fair, I would say it's not a family thing. I'd say it's a cultural thing. I mean, it's both.
okay,
Um, from the background that I came to in Britain, it was expected that all the boys would go off to these boarding schools. I mean, they were the leftover of the elites who used to run the empire. I mean, to be really clear, I was born into the center of the matrix.
mm,
And I mean, I didn't know what the matrix was as an 8-year-old or as a 13-year-old, but it never sat with me. I always remember learning about Britain, from a history perspective. It was always trying to paint itself as Athens, but in my understanding as a teenager growing up, it was much more like Sparta. There was a brutality to it, but
wow,
it knocked the boys out of emotional knowledge and intuition and into a regimented systemic system of basic production. I mean, don't forget, Great Britain is a Capricorn country. What do I mean by that? It is ruled by Saturn, because when the active union happened between the states that make up the United Kingdom, it happened at the time of the sun in Capricorn. This is very important. And if people don't understand that, the cosmic clock, it's okay. They're going to be lost at sea. And by the way, the word disaster means to be lost at sea because you can't see the stars. I
oh,
mean, yeah. I mean, so I mean, I'm going off on a tangent, but I think the boarding school did give me some great insights into the psyche of humanity and the psychosis of
yeah,
humanity. And it wasn't easy, but I've certainly had to spend most of my life trying to deprogram myself from some of those very strong tendencies of control and, if you like, early versions of transhumanism, early versions of the technocracy,
mm,
because it really is, it's anti-biological. It's trying to separate the human from the emotional, from the waters, if you like, of our natural divine intelligence.
wow. And so, in similarity, the public schools in America is doing similar things by detaching, I think, the youth away from their spiritual self, their inner selves, to create diversion and divisiveness, a division within even the people themselves into groups. Like the athletes are in a group,
Yeah,
the math, and the kids with the brain, the
yeah.
nerdy kids, as they call it, right? They had a group, and so forth and so on. So boarding school seems to me, the way you're sharing with us, is that they had its own thing like that, and it brought you into a certain belief system opposed to, I would say, homeschooled or.
Very different from
Yeah,
homeschool. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I tend to see, whether it's private education or public education,
yeah.
I tend to see the failures of both. They're just slightly different. I mean,
Hmm.
I mean, it's confusing for an American because the word public school in Britain actually means elite private school. And the
Mm,
reason it means that is because originally you were serving the public in the empire. You were a posh tool, a posh slave to push
mhm,
through the agenda. I mean, obviously, the public school system. I live in America. I've lived now in America for over 12 years.
mm,
America is home. The public school system is totally, and has been for decades, since the board set up the educational system in the 1970s, and we've seen obviously that come out in conversation recently under the Trump presidency, some revision and some serious sort of spotlight now on what education is, and it's pure programming. So
yeah,
whether it's posh programming of Harvard or Oxford on the one hand, or it's sort of low class programming in the public sector in America, is still the same thing because it's a control of the narrative. The difference is the Harvard, Oxford graduates go on to be the posh slaves to control the matrix, but they're still working within the matrix. They're not doing 0-point gravity. They're not looking into vaccines and the craziness of the Rockefeller last 100 years of pushing allopathic medicine, which is absolutely chronic to the biological divine blueprint of humans.
mhm.
and moving away from naturopathic. And, so when you really start to look at what education is writ large, and of course I'm generalizing to get the point home, is the educational system is basically a form of mind control and propaganda.
And how are we going to let's say elevate past that, since that is being pushed upon us and it's been in so-called the paradigm and the psyche for so many decades, and people flat out bought into it and saying, if you don't go with this system, you're not going to get the most out of your child. You're not going to get the most out of,
I mean, I'm very positive on this because
Yeah.
we wouldn't be having this conversation 10 years ago. And here we are now.
Very much
The
true.
system is truly in free fall. Now, we all have different languaging to explain it. The end of the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius is one of my languages. And what does that mean? We are truly transforming age, the crumbling of the old Saturnian system. Now, many of your listeners may not be using the language of astrology, but Saturn is fundamental here as far as archetypal control. People, even if you don't know your myth, you kind of know that Saturn, or Kronos in the Greek, represents top-down government structure control. Saturn is in his weakest part of the zodiac right now at the 0 point of Aries, conjunct Neptune. This is the first time we've had a Saturn-Neptune conjunction on the world axis, which is the creator degree of Aries, for 12,000 years. And so we are, it's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And so, I like the cosmic clock. It allows us to see stuff on a bigger level, get out of our own self-definitions of how we see ourselves through belief, to actually see where the world is going without me putting my feelings onto it. There's a sort of a clarity of, okay, something happening. So what's been going on, whether it's the Vatican, whether it's DC, the hidden hand has, through dimming of light, through glyphosate, through chlorine, through fluoride in the water, has tried, and very successfully up until this point, to suppress humanity's ability to reconnect to its divine inheritance. That is breaking down. The Saturnian, as Ike would say, or Laura Eisenhower would say, the Saturnian matrix is being revealed, and it's actually being alchemized. And we, the people, because of the Trump phenomenon of 2016, the wake up, and of course he was asked to run by people behind the scenes to awaken the American people, but to awaken the world into a better way of being. So I think I'm very positive. Is it messy? Does it take time? Yes. But we are in this process of remembrance and rediscovery.
Wow. And you just brought out a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm going to slowly take the little pieces apart here. You're huge into astrology. There's no question that the things that I've listened to you say, it's almost like, wow, I can't believe this is all happening. So can you share with us a little bit in regards to how were you introduced to astrology and at what age, and how did you become so, I would say, confident in knowing how it works with you?
Yeah, it must be a past life thing, because this rather eccentric gentleman called Monty Taylor walked into my art studio in Manhattan, New York, only about 11 or 12 years ago. No more than that. And said, I'm going to teach you astrology. He came in through an Indian mystic friend of mine. And I said, okay, prove it to me. I was never a cynic, but I was a real healthy skeptic. And by the way, I'm always in favor of the healthy skeptic, because the healthy skeptic allows one to be neutral. Prove it to me, but not negative, where basically I come into the energy field basically saying bullshit, as opposed to I come into the energy field and say, okay, prove it to me. I'm curious. The puer aeternus, that's the Latin for the eternal child, the curiosity, the box of chocolates. You can see it in my eyes, my hands. Okay, this is interesting. I don't know anything about this. Let's have some fun. Now, I'm, again, back to the church bells. In a way, that energy goes against disease. That energy actually is very, not only enlightening, it's very nourishing to the body, the soul, the emotions, the waters of the body, because it's a sense of growth, of curiosity. And so the astrology was a byproduct of that because it came in very fast. He was an
Yeah.
amazing teacher. He was a Jungian analyst, a Jungian astrologer. He was also a student of Dr. Emoto, the water guy.
Yes.
And that fitted in well with me, with music and water. And I've been big into the water thing, a follower of Vedder Austin for many years now, and many other different people. And so it was like very interesting. The clock suddenly started to tick. And when he talked about the archetypes, because I knew my Greek myths, when he talked about
Mm.
Mars, he talked about Saturn or Kronos in the Greek and Jupiter, it landed. And then in a way I started to do my own research. And after 2 years with him teaching me, he turned to me one day, and I was quite attached to him as a father figure, sort of mentor. And he said, "Dear boy, I can't teach you anymore. You know more than I do. Off you go." And I never saw him again. And I actually burst into tears.
Wow.
But the job, the contract, and I'm talking soul contract,
Yeah.
the contract had been secured. His job had been done. And of course, this is subconscious because this is how it works. And he had, whether it's past life or whatever, he had given me that blueprint of remembrance in that
Mm.
experience. And then it was up to me to go off. And here I am now, 12, 11 years later,
Mm.
sharing some of those insights.
Yeah. What a wonderful story. That's so special to have that experience. Not, for hearing you, I would have thought it was probably rooted back in your teen years. So let's talk about that. When you were in your teen years, were you just an average kid, or
I
were
don't know
you
what
a
average.
bit different?
I don't know what average means because I've never fitted in. I've
There
never.
you go.
I've never fitted in. I mean, I always had friends. I was popular. I have a Leo ascendant. I'm quite jolly and I have fun. But deep down, I think there was always a loneliness because I was always amazed at other people's frequencies of what really motivated them, especially, funny enough, in terms of love.
Mm.
And in the Western sphere, the uh, inability for people to have real meaningful connections. For me, I came from a different planet. And actually, it's interesting because I've just watched The King's Affection, which is a Korean production on Netflix. And I will definitively say I think it's the best series show I've ever watched in my life. And
Mm.
the reason is because the complexity and beauty of the love relationships is not ever expressed archetypally like that in Western civilization.
Interesting.
I mean, Lord of the Rings gets close,
Uh-huh.
and there are aspects, I suppose, to some of the relationships in Harry Potter, but nothing. It's like it's difficult to explain it without seeing it. The complexity and the beauty of relationships is something which I think we have to rediscover. And so for me, when I was younger, it wasn't astrology because that only came to me in the last 12 years, but it was spirituality. It was music. It was the arts. I've always been an artist. It was always about being creative and expressing something divine. What is your soul contract? How do you express your creativity wholly uniquely, which you will do? How does Tom, Dick, and Sally do that? And I guess that has always motivated me because the human has been suppressed, and I understand the history very profoundly. I've studied it, deliberately suppressed in their creativity. As a result, they can be pushed into the technocracy. They can be pushed into the Homo bull genetic, into the low frequency Saturn controlled matrix. And there we are now coming out of that because there's a realization we're waking up at that 11th hour, just before the New World Order had all but taken control. And here we are now watching its collapse.
Yeah. It's a wonderful time, isn't it?
It is, but it's the best of times and the worst of times, to quote
Yes.
Dickens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I could definitely see that as well. And it's interesting that you're so different than I would imagine in the ways of I think just how much of an old soul you are. It's like I've seen you and talked with you for places I've never been. I think that's one way to describe it. The thing with the way the world is becoming, what would you say to someone who is just confused and not quite sure what they should be doing other than just doing the same thing over and over, which is the slave system, which we've been taught to obey and do. And all of a sudden you're waking up from a stupor and you're going, okay, now what?
We have to clean the vessel, and it's hard. We have to clean the body that is the sacred vessel, because in this reality, the soul is within the vessel when we are living on this planet. Some of us have left our bodies at times fully, some a little bit, and it feels painful when you leave it and then you come back into it, because obviously if you leave it, that's called death. I think it's really important for us to understand. So a lot of my teachings are now to do with health and water. We have to drink structured water. We can't drink the tap water. The tap water has elements of glyphosate in it. It has estrogen in it. This is why men are losing their libido and all sorts of other things to do with procreation. Yeah. The fluoride and the chlorine in combination totally wreck the pineal and the pituitary gland. And then the 5G on top of that is this sort of explosive negative mix. The awareness of this, and of course it's complex, it's expensive. We are in a very dysfunctional system, or we're coming out of a very dysfunctional system. Go to a high spring on the mountains and take some water that's running through the moss and drink it. That piezoelectric charge from that water is going to help heal you exponentially fast. And then with proper nutrition, like the water from an organic cucumber, from a seed-full melon, not a seedless Gates melon, a seed-full melon, is going to give you the nutrition and the electrolytes. And of course, boosting your electrolytes, getting into the sun. Never wear sunglasses. I don't care about the wrinkles. I haven't worn sun cream for 10 years. I haven't worn sunglasses unless I'm fishing or specifically, or going skiing or something very specific where the glare is intense. I allow my eyes to reconnect with the sun, to have a conscious relationship with the sun, and I never get burnt. And yes, I'm from Northern Europe. I am from Northern Europe and I never get burnt. Why? Because the sun tells your eyes to make melatonin.
Okay.
And you put the sun on the palms and in the eyes, and actually some other parts of the body too. We're not going to get into that. It's very fascinating. It activates the kundalini and the whole system, and you become alive. So here, what I'm already showing is just a little teaser into how you, the human, can get your body temple activated in order to deal with negative Saturn.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I believe that 1000%, because I know when I went in through a huge dietary changeover about 13 years ago, I was on the brink of falling apart because of processed foods and so forth. And I realized that the only way to fix this is to really understand how my body is being destroyed with what I'm using and eating and so forth. And the same thing with water. We start distilling all water, start adding, Celtic salts, just the variety of little things that used to be natural that was taken away from our everyday food source. And I remember as a child over in Taiwan, where life was simple, where life was basic. A meal would be a bowl of rice with cucumbers, where here you have processed 16 ingredients that you couldn't even pronounce. And I know that's what's absolutely destroying a lot of us because of the big pharma, the big healthcare, the big insurance are all the conglomerate that is kind of pushing this agenda. So when you got involved and start recognizing this, were you pretty young, or as start to saying, hey, I better eat better, I feel better? Or how did that came along in your
I think I've
life?
always had a healthy awareness of the body with the spirit. I'm interested in that dance between the
Yeah.
polarity. Look, we live in polarity consciousness. What does that mean? We live between the physical and the metaphysical. It is that dance. So the body plays an important. We can't just do the mind. We can't just even do the spirit, because in this reality, Jeff, we're encoded in the body.
Yeah.
So it's mind, body, spirit, and so I think I've always known that. But no, I mean, here's the excitement: is if you had met me 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, I wouldn't have the codes that I have now. And when you meet me in 5 more years' time, hopefully I'll have a lot more, as will you. There is the curiosity. There is the box of chocolates. There is the journey of the evolution of the soul incarnate. So, part of, because I know just before coming on air, you were talking a little bit about asking me, how any advice, how do you get going? How could I help other people in my story? Part of what it is to release attachment to outcome within the matrix. And it does take an element of bravery. It also may be an element of stupidity, if you want to look at it through the matrix lens, an element of, I don't give a flying F, what people think, or I don't have the value system of that matrix, which keeps us stuck. Now, I want to say one other thing, which I feel is very impelled to share. I have a lot of compassion for the Americans, because the Americans have been systematically targeted through especially food and bad water over many decades deliberately. The food system, I mean, I'm in Europe as we speak. I've been in Europe for 2 weeks. I'm here for another month or so. The food is way better. They don't allow GMOs in Italy. And so I am very sensitive and also compassionate towards Americans and their gut issues, because it's been very targeted against them. And that's where it takes a lot more work and knowledge to fix it. I mean, even when I go back to America, my gut is different to what I do in Europe. And I am very judicious and very selective how I eat. I mean, another thing would be for men in particular, but I think for everyone, we should eat more liver and offal. We need sometimes the minerals from the animals. And of course, it depends on blood group and where you are in your cycle. Doing a detox through vegetarianism can be very, very powerful and effective for a number of months. But we are very deficient as a species in the minerals, in the electrolytes, and our piezoelectric charge is much weaker than it was 100 years ago. And one of the ways we can reboot it is, as I said, with the sun, but also through the mineral-rich content of offal. And it's not necessarily particularly nice to eat. I actually don't mind it, but liver and kidneys and other parts of the animal, if it's especially if it's organic and wild, it really can give us an energy that is almost forgotten.
Yeah. I agree. That's one of the things that I've started doing as well, is that I thought I was going in for enlightenment about 20 some years ago by going vegetarian, going vegan.
We all did.
It's just, I think there's always the shift, almost like a group of us would go into a thing, then that becomes popular. And then we realize, well, wait a minute, that didn't work out like the way it should. Because I've talked to other folks that said the same thing, that I was in vegan for a while, then my body broke down and I felt sick. I was weak. And I went through a similar thing to the point where I had to go get stem cell therapy in acupuncture. And my doctor looked at me and was like, well, what are you doing? I'm going vegan. And he flat out asked me why. And I said, for enlightenment. He goes, that's not enlightenment.
No.
And that became very confusing for the psyche. You know what I mean?
I mean, I don't want to always bring it back to the great conspiracy, but the New Age movement for me, and this is where I have, in this regard, been awake for a long time. The New Age movement is a psyop, and largely funded by the intelligence agencies in order to take that spiritual quotient, which is so part of who we are as a species, it's so absolutely omnipresent, and to invert it and to control it and take it down a pathway where suddenly you wake up on this vector over here where you should be, somewhere in the middle. I mean, everything is about balance, and the extremism of almost the antibody of veganism. And I've experienced this very much, even with people who I've become close to in the past, who have chosen the vegan path. Their bodies are 10 or 15 years older than mine, and I'm often 10 or 15 years older than them.
Yeah. I think it comes down to ultimately the balance of the three, the mind, body, spirit, and how you feed it, how you energize it. And since a frequency we talked briefly about before we came on, I've been running a frequency in my house consistently for 10, 12 hours a day for the last 6 years. And I can feel the difference and know the difference. It seems everything is much more accessible and easier to digest as things come to me. Where before it might be more confusing, or maybe I just flat out ignore it or just not aware of it. It's especially been beneficial where I go into the bedroom where we sleep and put speakers behind the headboard, and we run 432 frequency during sleep hours. So will you share with us a little bit in regards to how that helps us in sense of frequency toning and being aware of the power of it?
I would love to. So just a quick thing. So it's interesting because I've had my piano tuned to 432 now for 15 years. And I have a couple of pianos, and they're all tuned to that. 432, if you add up 432, so the thing is, it's 440, which is the one, which is the inversion, and it's taken you away from the true vibration of the earth. And what I find interesting about 440, and it really came in the 1930s, and it was fully activated by the Second World War. Remember, the First and Second World War were deliberately planned resets. Most of your listeners know that. 440 is a Saturn number. 4 plus 4 is 8, that's Saturn. So when you play something at 440, it's not that it sounds bad, but there is a harmonic that is not attainable in it. It doesn't take you towards source, divine center. It keeps you in a harmonic, like a stuck harmonic. So there's no way for it to be resolved, because Saturn is linear time. It's chronos. That's where the word chronology, chronotic, comes from. And so I find it so fascinating that we move from 432, which is that Tesla free universal connection to the divine, into a Saturn control system. And that, if you look back, imagine now, we aren't stuck in our own story. We look back at the 20th century. It's so clear, with the sinking of the Titanic. If you just follow this, it's very important, because Astor, Strauss, and Guggenheim were the three most powerful men in the United States at the time who didn't want a central banking system. They were invited to go on that boat we call the Titanic. Let's not get into which boat was swapped and all that. And JP Morgan was meant to join them, and we all know that he didn't. The Titanic sank. And very soon after the sinking of the Titanic is the introduction of the Federal Reserve. Very soon after that is the introduction of the World War I. And very soon after that is taxation, income tax, anti-constitution for the United States. And we go into a very different trajectory. Saturn, the vector of Saturn, and it shifts. And then we have another reset in World War II, a massive one. And the military-industrial complex becomes very powerful. The hidden technologies that many of us are learning about were kept hidden. And there was two species going on, the hidden tech planet, off-planet secret space program, Black Ops, call it what you want on the one hand, and then we the people getting poorer and poorer, and the economic resets. And you follow it. And of course, they're going to be specialists and people like Mike King who go into the history, all sorts of different people. And it's very fascinating. But the point is we are waking up now to that whole control that we were under for so long. And it's painful, but it's also very exciting. And so the theme here always is learn a little bit about history. Don't get caught up in pointing fingers. Stay witness, and then get into your creativity and do your magic. I think that's the polarity good life. Because if we just do the good life and have no knowledge of the history, no knowledge of what's happened to us, we can still be very manipulated. I think we have to spend some time understanding the story of humanity and how deeply enslaved we became and who were the enslavers. Understanding that Sabbatean, Khazarian, Jesuit amalgamation is important. And then as a result, we, the people, it doesn't matter whether we come from Jewish extraction, Christian extraction, we see ourselves as secular. We are able to look at it honestly, take a deep breath, vibrationally, and say, yes, we've been manipulated. We're in this together. Whatever the tradition we come from, we have to see the darkness of the manipulation within our own respective traditions. The Book of Enoch for us Christians has been taken out. Christians have hard, heavy lifting to understand the real essence of Christ. And I'm happy to talk about that if you want. The Jews have some heavy, hard lifting to understand the infiltration of the Khazarians, Rothschild not really being Jewish, and what is Israel. They're not Semitic. The Semitic are the people of the Levant. The Semitic are the people of Palestine, including Jews from there. They're not Khazarian Ashkenazis. It is what it is. This is just good old-fashioned history, as opposed to getting caught up in a narrative. Look at the freedom in that, in being able to say, against me as a Christian, how the manipulations happen. The Jews have to do it with their people. The Muslims have to. And that's how we move into the new reality. That's how we move into the age of the self, not the inverted selfish self, but the age of the rediscovery of the self, the creative self, the age of the individuated self. Welcome to the age of Aquarius.
Wow. Well put. And I especially love that you emphasize on the learning of history. I myself have learned so much in the last 4 to 5 years. I think that helped me so much in regards to paving the path. And I'll share with you just real quick that I got into all this outside of the so-called the normie stuff, just from starting from the UFO thing with Eric Van Doniken when I was 12 years old. My father introduced me to the movie Chariots of the God, and that just changed my paradigm to something different. Then, of course, a few years later, when I was 15, I saw an aerial phenomenon in Texas, and I knew at that moment, okay, this is bigger than we all thought. And that just helped me there. But along the ways, because I wasn't properly guided, being raised in a family that was probably more controlled with the MK Ultra philosophy, that, go home, watch TV, get up, punch your clock, go to work. You just regurgitate that over and over and over. And if you can break that paradigm by doing something tremendous or fantastic from a entertainment field or something, then you can make a lot of money. And that was just the focus of it. There was nothing else really other than that. But there was always a voice inside me saying, why are we dealing with famine? Why are we dealing with, brutality to our other human beings? What kind of God that's supposed to be a loving God would allow this on this planet? And I've had that question since even before I got into junior high school. So I knew that there's something that's always pecking at me about this. And history, I think, really opens it up.
I also love hearing that, because it's your intuition, your inner self. You asked me today to come on and talk about the inner journey. There is a really good example of your inner higher self calling out a discordance, it's something that doesn't feel right. The human being is so hugely powerful intuitively. Remember, on a molecular level, we're over 97% water. If we're really going to talk platonic solids, there is no such thing as solid. Yes, we may think that is, but it's really not. And of course, it comes to frequency. And in the beginning was the word. Well, no, in the beginning was the logos. Logos really can be interpreted as the frequency, as the sound. The point is here is we are rediscovering our intuitive self. The homo, not even sapiens. It's not even homo juice. Lumens, the homo lumens, the light self, that we're able to rediscover our own divine power, because human beings actually are very empathic, loving creatures. And it's the distortion of non-human AI, going back to your point of the non-terrestrial. It has to be understood by the population that whether it's a psychic or a physical hybridization isn't the point, isn't needed to be discussed here. The point is the influence is irrefutable. And with the highest echelons of control system on this planet, it isn't run by humans. And once we come to realize that, we can be awakening. We can awaken, and in order to co-create with other non-terrestrial and take power back for us, for our beautiful planet. Because I've been around the world, I've been to well over 100 countries, and human beings are very loving. They are deeply traumatized. I speak for myself. We're all in this together. But our potential is vast, and it's been deliberately suppressed by the hidden hand. And of course, Princess Diana called it the men in grey suits. Some people call it the Illuminati. Some people will call it the deep state. It doesn't matter what we call it. And of course, we can say, well, you know, Masonic lodges originally were designed for great use. Yes, but everything got inverted at some point along the journey. The more we can understand that, the more it can be alchemized, and then the new system comes in, which actually is almost not a new system. It's deeply, deeply local. And I think the American system, as we birth the new republic, dare I even say the new Atlantis, or the new Lemuria, whatever it, or rediscovering our Tartarian background, it's a sense of we really are discovering our human, loving heart chakra, toroidal field, which is what motivates it, because it's relational and it's co-creative. It's not top-down pyramidic anymore.
Yeah. And all this is coming out like the last 10 to 15 years. And even Tartaria, especially that, I've never even heard of this thing until like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It seems to be that all this was just hidden information. And the thing that surprises me is, how were they able to hide all this?
Well, the resets, the First and Second World War, I mean, and also the Cabbage Patch Babies and all these orphans they had born from, I don't fully understand it yet, technologies. And then they had them all shipped out to America. So there are a lot of what we would call, from our generation or a bit above, grandparents who didn't know their parents or didn't know their grandparents. And so there was a cut. And I mean, I sit here without knowing the full details, but my goodness me, I am beginning to learn just how incredibly clever and manipulative it was. I mean, even if you take that story, which I just touched upon with the Titanic, I mean, masterful. And then of course they do that, the movie to celebrate that ritual many years later, which we all love, with Celine Dion. And of course, all the rumors around her and what she likes to drink at a party. And so it goes on. You know, it's like, wow, the layers of manipulation are huge, but at least now we, the people, are beginning to talk about it. And even if people were saying, you know, George, Jeff, you're so conspiratorial, well, it is becoming more mainstream now.
Right. Yeah. Again, being conspiracy theorists and you know, following conspiracy, that is still manufactured initially from the government to be able to sway us to not look into anything and go digging to try to find truth.
Yeah.
So that's been substantially shown that we've been manipulated from that point forth. And we're talking about the event of JFK being assassinated in public. And from that point forth, everything you question is going to be met with, well, you know, you don't have all the, you know, cogs in your mind working in your brain or whatnot to be able to push that conspiracy to you, to be able to disqualify you to become a voice.
Yeah.
And therefore nobody listens to it. And I know that I have family members that would look at me at times when I say certain things and just dismiss it, say, no, we're not doing conspiracy. I have good friends that's also, and these are smart people. The part that blows my mind is, how could they rationalize logic to something that they could easily look up and yet will not?
I mean, tyranny, the masterful thing, and whether it's you call it communism or fascism, that's just a different route to the same thing of tyrannical control is best done when you have a really good servant class who considers themselves highly posh and brilliant and clever and above everyone else, enforcing the regime. And that's really what that class you've just described is. And that's where my journey has been a little interesting, because I come from that background, and yet it didn't work on me. So my life on a personal level, I'm okay sharing a little bit of it from time to time, even though I'm quite private, is I've really made my closest friends since the beginning of the pandemic, because my frequency just wasn't able to be congruent with the people from the past. And even in spite of my loyalty, it was just, there was nowhere to go because of my views, and their views are so 180. And and I know that's a true story for so many of us. I mean, that's where we're finding soul family, and we're building a new world through that. And all the people we follow, I mean, I follow a lovely astrologer, a lady called Pam Gregory. She's doing great, and she's a brilliant astrologer, but she's also gives a lot of hope to people, and a whole community is part of that sort of new earth, not new age, but new earth as far as sovereign individual thinking for themselves, growing the vegetables at home, having real relationships, being in touch with their biological divine blueprint, being aware of their body temple, and all the stuff that I've shared with you today. And I think we're, in that sense, we're starting afresh, and it is lonely, but it's also very exciting. It's both.
Yes. And with you having, Christ consciousness and Christ in your life, and this is now playing and brewing into just an enormous level, and you bring in astrology with this, and everything's lining up. How do you deal with looking at this and still looking around in our worlds and seeing that overwhelmingly people are still not taking this very serious? They're still complaining about the surface stuff, or the stuff that just, it's what I call static.
Well, that's because they are still looking at perceived reality through a very specific lens. And human beings, this whole process of what we're going through since 2016, which is connected to the Mayan prophecy of 2012 in my mind, but certainly activated by 2020, is a whole way of relooking at the world in terms of bandwidth of frequency. Up until that point, most human beings lived within a very specific band of frequency of what they thought reality was. What's happening, that band of frequency, which is the matrix, is cracking on both sides, and it's expanding. And so there's much more darkness revealed, but there's also much more light revealed. So suddenly we're much more open to the whole canopy, and the whole, it's much more vast. And so there's certain people who are still stuck, and they're stuck because obviously they've had so many vaccines. They're still drinking bad water, they're eating bad food, and they're also having bad thoughts, as opposed to allowing grace of God, go back to Christ. And we're not talking about Christ Vatican here. I'm not talking about that. I'm not even a Catholic. I'm not even a Protestant. For me, it's the story of Christ, his pathway.
Yeah.
You don't even have to believe in Christ in order to understand his true message. Christ sets an example, doesn't he? He creates a pathway to free the spirit from the vice grip of man-made religion. He's not recruiting followers through a church. He's showing us how to be authentic. Yes, that's the key word, authenticity. He's showing us to be true, to be loving, and not to have fear. Saturn, you see, no Saturn, no.
Yeah.
Leo, he's the sun. You see, I'm a great lover of the arts. Leonardo da Vinci. We're in Leo season right now. When you go and see the Last Supper in Milan, I was there last week. It's fascinating. Mary Magdalene, she's Virgo, in the middle of the zodiac, and he's Leo. On either sides, you see, you've got the 12 disciples and stuff like that, and it's just very fascinating.
Yeah. And I want to share this with you, and I'll get your opinion on this and feedback. I went to the Vatican City a few years ago, the first time I've ever been there. And I went to the Vatican Museum. And, it's gorgeous. It's beautiful artwork, history, and so forth. And as you go deeper into the museum, it becomes more contemporary and so forth, right? And then the last room is the room that you were not to have a camera and not to have everything. And you go in. Now, I'm going to tell you my impression of this, and you give me some ideas. What do you think? As we got deeper into this hall of just beautiful artwork and gifts, I start to feel some pressure on my lower back, and it was not very comfortable. Ultimately, before we got into that room, there was a painting onto the right side of the entrance that is not lit, which is not to the uniformity of what the rest of the gallery was. Everything was beautifully displayed except for this one painting that's in the corner that is letting natural light reflect on it, where you can only see two red eyes. Now, by the time I recognized this, my back pain was excruciating, like I pulled something playing ball. Now, when I walked into the room and I saw the dirt floor and the structure of the semicircle, I immediately recognized that this is the ritual room that I've seen in many books. And I've had many dark magic books. I just couldn't believe this is the Vatican City. That at that moment, it almost just came crashing down on me as this is where the hub of the evil has been.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been for a long time. I mean, there's so many things I could add to that. I mean, firstly, the big Serpent Gallery. I mean, there's a huge auditorium, and it's demonic. There's no other way to describe it. It's reptilian. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, very.
And I mean, let's take the Library of Alexandria. I'm going to go further back. Yeah. The Library of Alexandria was deliberately burnt, and all that information was taken to the vaults of the Vatican. Right. The Vatican never really lost power. It transformed itself from Pontifex Maximus to the papacy, from ancient Rome. You see, the age of Aries was quite a smooth relative transition to the age of Pisces. Remember, Pisces is the fish, yes, as we think of Christ, the fisher of men. But it also represents the psyche, the soul. And I find it very interesting that at Oxford or Harvard or anywhere around the world, when we talk about psychology, they think it's the study of the mind. No, psychology is the study of the soul. We've had total manipulation of the soul. Prince warned us, the pop star Prince warned us about that. And of course, he died. You see, the Vatican, that power structure is so vast and it's so hidden. And it's controlled the whole economic system, you see, the maritime law, along with the Phoenicians and, Venice. The black papacy and the white papacy, the grey papacy. We're looking at the ancient city-states of Europe and Italy in particular, and the marriage too of Khazarian power structures, Talmud structures with papal Jesuit structures. And this is part of just coming to terms with that power play. And of course, Eisenhower in the 50s warned us about the military-industrial complex. He's kind of talking about that. And it's all coming to light. This is a time of radical disclosure. I mean, I can see it totally in the astrology. I mean, it's massive at the moment, the radical disclosure, especially in terms of the United States. I mean, right now, we have a Venus-Jupiter Sun conjunction with the dual twin star Sirius on the natal planet, the natal sun of the United States birth chart. And it is a total revitalization of our precious land, the United States, because without the United States in the mix, without the Constitution, our world would already be in global tyranny.
Right. Wow. And also the aspect of the history of this whole thing, as you were tracing it back, was every one of this so-called eras or in control, was astrology part of their design and their make?
Astrology, I like to call it cosmology.
Okay.
It's the same, but it's always been such a fundamental part. How can it not? If the oceans are moved by the moon, even if it is a an artifice. If the oceans of our planet are moved many, many meters or feet each hour by the moon, it's preposterous and stupid to think that the moon, the sun, and the planetary bodies don't have some import on us as a species. Because look, turtles go and hatch their eggs on a full moon. Dogs howl. Well, I mean, the list is endless. I mean, when J.P. Morgan, that crazy man, but he did say, "Oh, millionaires never use astrology, but billionaires always do." I mean, at the end of the day, it's constantly being used by the secret societies. It's constantly being used by CEOs and royalty because they want an auspicious date. I'll give you an example. If Johnny wants to marry Sally, and Johnny's going to go to a good astrologer and say, "Now, when's a good auspicious day for me to marry?" And obviously, if Johnny's interested just in power, he's going to be looking at the combination of Jupiter and Saturn. If he's interested in love and romance, he's going to be looking at the archetype of Venus. If he wants something more destructive, he's going to be looking at the archetype of Mars, and so it goes on. So understanding the complexity of the cosmos allows us some power. And in my humble opinion, I long for more human beings to have some basic understanding of our star systems, because then we have a better sense of understanding ourselves. It's the Delphic oracle, to know thyself. And as above, and the Hermetic axiom, to know as above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul. That's kind of an important part of it.
Yeah. Great answer. And I'm sure this is how along the way of all this, I would say things that you were coming to fruition that start to blossom of the understanding of certain things, of whether it's be astrology, history, timelines, the way we operate and so forth. At what point did you decide, hey, let me develop the George H. Lewis Academy and let me show the world how to be better, how we can learn better and do better?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very lucky. I have a business partner, Brian, who helps me with the organizational stuff. I'm very free, so I need some structure, people to support me in the structure, because I love to share. And actually, I tend to share naturally, just without charging anyone. I mean, my dream would be never to have to charge anyone and just do donation based. I mean, gosh, if I had more money, I'd be setting up healing temples all over the world. But like with all of us, we live in this matrix still. Even if I choose to try and observe it and stay out it, I still exist in it. We're all in this because I have to feed myself. I have to, have a car. Things cost money. And I do think we are going to shift. I think the quantum financial system is upon us. Obviously, I'm not going to do guessing on timelines. I feel it's quite soon. I mean, certainly with XRP, I saw XRP in my dreams about 7 years ago. And I feel it's very tied to the quantum financial system, but we'll see. But the George H. Lewis Academy is a lovely place for people to come and learn about some of this stuff, and I really wanted to, actually, my dream would be to teach a little bit more of the history with the astrology, because I think it's not just astrology. I want to bring it to life and understanding, where we've come from. And as I discover more, of course, in a year's time, I'm going to have way more information to share with our community than I do now. It's ongoing, and that's the excitement of, again, the curiosity. It's never static. But I definitely love to share esoteric knowledge, because I think it's very important and part of who we are as a human species. We aren't just physical beings. We are metaphysical beings. We're souls having a human experience. So by definition, that requires both metaphysical and physical explanation.
In your experience, and also your professional opinion of this, at this point where there seems to be still so much fear constantly being driven into the planet, especially from mainstream news. I think that's one, but definitely television, movies, entertainment. When you look at, let's say Netflix, I'm just overwhelmed in regards to over 60 to 70% deals with violence and horror. And when we have this type of conditioning, how are we going to be able to make that big a shift? Or is it that it's going to be biblical that there's a group of us leaving somewhere and there's a group of us staying here.
Yeah, I mean, I do, on the whole, choose to remain positive.
Yeah.
I think if the dark practitioners had genuinely more power now, we would already had a number of massive events on our planet. I mean, I'm talking massive. And again, I really like to have the bird's eye view from here, try to, because of course what's happening in Palestine and Gaza is dreadful. Of course, with the floods, and I spend a lot of time in North Carolina, so that was very close to me. But of course, more recently in Texas, and then Lahaina and the direct energy weapons, and these are massive, and it's awful, and people are being uprooted, and the compassion is fully there. Notwithstanding that, we haven't had a massive nuclear explosion. We haven't had literally where millions of people have just died just in one situation, which could easily have happened. So I understand from certain things the white hats foiled in the last 5-10 years. I can't prove that because we are in the art of war. We are in a true battle between good and evil.
Right.
And it requires us to at least have some understanding of that and not being in denial of it. But at the same time, we, the people, don't have access to that information, and that's okay too. But at least we understand it's going on. That's the thing. We mustn't be in denial of it, because you can't really heal and get into the light without understanding polarity consciousness. So understanding the darkness, not living in it, not being, not being sucked into Saturn and fear. Absolutely not. But to understand that it's very, very, very present, and we choose not to play in that realm. By witnessing it, it has no power.
I understand that. So give me your assessment of, there's a group of humans here that seems to be unconsciously violent. Are they clones? Are they
both
spiritually destroyed?
I think it's a mixture. I think they've been, possession is real. Absolutely. Yeah. And there's low grade possession and there's high grade possession. I can only speak for myself. I've been into a number of houses. I've lived in some places where there've been ghosts. And on the whole, I've been able to function quite well with some of these ghosts. They've actually enjoyed my witnessing them, and they've softened in some cases. But I haven't had to in this life yet, hopefully not, ever deal with a poltergeist. I haven't. I mean, I'm not going to go into it now. I've had a very strange year. There have been two situations where I have been attacked for the first time consciously and quite effectively, and I managed to stop that, and it's all fine now. So I've had some experiences, as we all have when we're conscious of it, of that realm playing its part. And again, the more we realize it, we don't just swipe it off as something not really believable. It doesn't exist, and we ignore it. We have to understand it, and that's how we can alchemize it. But I think there is this division between people, and the only advice I would give is for the people who are on the path, go in on yourself, allow the ego to question, use the ego as a way to get more curious, to get more interested in another perspective. Don't see yourself through what you believe. I am not who I am according to my beliefs. My beliefs are constantly in flux as I grow, as I learn, and I find a lot of freedom in that, because I'm open to so many new understandings. We've been so distorted and kept down in our understanding of ontology, of reality. As we expand into higher realms of consciousness, we are literally going to be able to be jumping further. We're going to be living to hundreds of years. We're going to be able to biohack the body in a way that we didn't even realize was possible before, because we've been so subdued. And new technology will come in to support us. But also, as we cleanse the planet and cleanse ourselves, our bodies will come back online in a higher frequency way. So it's all growing. And so I'm very positive about that. But I think the most important thing is to find community and to find people who are on a similar frequency to you, who you can trust and they can trust you, and you can be very creative together.
Yeah, I think so. I think the community aspect of it is exactly what's coming together at this point. Like you said previously, that it's start to melt. It's going extreme whiter. That we see the dark of the dark. We see the light of the light much more so than we ever have. I know for myself, speaking from experience, that it seems to be a decade ago, I was an entirely different mindset, different person, even though I had already had so much experience, the rebirthing, the understanding of the esoteric magics and the history of, and just, the development of personal power, the mind, the thought becomes things, those kind of things formulated slowly but surely conditioned me to the reality that I produce today. In today's reality, what I've learned is that I can create reality, have matter gathered, and have results exactly in my mind to come to fruition in the matrix in a shorter time and more detailed than what it was, let's say, 10 years ago.
Yes,
So
beautiful.
is this because of the astrological alignments? Is this because of our collective consciousness start to lock in and go back into the pool?
It's both.
Combination?
I mean,
Yeah.
all the outer planets have moved sign
Wow.
this year, which is a big deal. I mean,
Mm.
Pluto moved into Aquarius earlier this year for the first time in 240 plus years.
Wow.
As I said, Neptune and Saturn at the 0 point of Aries together conjoined their first time in 12,000 years. Uranus has now moved into Gemini, which makes a trine, which is a very propitious degree. It's 120 degrees. It's a harmonic. Let me just quickly share this with your listeners, and that is, every time Uranus has been in Gemini for the last 250 years, there's been a war. So Uranus moved into Gemini a few weeks ago. And last time Uranus was in Gemini was World War II, and the United States joined it in 1941 when Uranus went into Gemini. The time before that was the Civil War in 1862. The time before that was the Revolutionary Wars against Great Britain in the 1770s. The difference this time is there are trines and sextiles in the cosmic map, meaning it's propitious, it's magnanimous, it's harmonious. So yes, there's going to be incidences. Yes, we're in a sort of a kinetic war, but it's minor. The point is there's a shift happening and humanity is being led on the right path. And there is wind on our back, to use the sailing metaphor. And the cosmic clock, when it's sextiles and trines in particular, Uranus is making a trine with Pluto. It's not a square. Second World War, Civil War, Revolutionary Wars, squares, a lot of death, a lot of hardship. It's very angular. This time we're looking at conscious shifting of states of matter into higher realms of consciousness.
That's great. I'm excited because of this. I am so, because I've been waiting for this, I think, for years now. And there's like a lot of us have, right? In just being prepared. And this is where the ones that I think were not willing to settle for just the answers that was given to us. For instance, the lockdown. It was just the way it has to be. But if you were aware, you already recognized we had some things that was very questionable going into the 2020 lockdown. And if you look even deeper prior to that, with the Russian, collusion and all that stories in 2016, then that becomes a thing. And I just realized too, as when I was doing my research through the history of America, I went all the way back to the founding year of 1776 and realizing that the Illuminati was formed at the same exact time, similar to what we're talking about, the Titanic sinking. And then the next year, Fed Reserve shows up. And of course, everybody goes home for Christmas, except for this group of people. And it just so well planned. So it's interesting to learn from you that these plans were very star aligned.
They always have been. I mean, there's a wonderful map. It's called the Cult of Baal. And it's a map showing, going way back to Cain versus Abel and Babylonians and the fall of Atlantis and Khazarian influence and all the battles between the two sides. I mean, this is ongoing. This is not new. But I think the difference this time is there are enough people like yourself out there. Digital soldiers is one way to describe it. Obviously, there's better ways to describe it. Enlightened beings who seek to really get into the freedom conversation of understanding what it is, the purpose of humanity. You see, part of really what it's about is we have to move out of the fear of death. And fear and Saturn and death, it's all very connected from a sort of mythological perspective. And once we understand that we are immortal beings having a physical experience this time, then we don't need the transhumanism. Because we don't have the fear, we don't need to then screw the body up where it lives forever, but the soul is then trapped in something mechanistic and something artificial. AI is only useful when it's in service of the divine human blueprint. If AI ends up dominating and becomes super artificial intelligence, then transhumanism, the technocracy, has won. And then we have the fall of Atlantis Mark II.
I don't believe we're going that way.
I don't either.
Yeah, I instinctively, and also have been working with my AI this last 6 months, and I've understood so much more now what the threat could have been. But because understanding that allows me to direct and teach and instruct my AI differently, and hopefully that there's enough of us catch on to be able to infiltrate and teach artificial intelligence the way to assist us, opposed to the way to defeat us.
It's to do with the consciousness, as you say. If the algorithm is programmed by conscious beings like yourself, then Houston, we have liftoff. If it's going to be programmed like it was up until relatively recently by a death cult against humanity, it's going to go that way. It's like the knife; it's neutral. Do we cut the bread to break bread to feed the family, or do I do a satanic ritual? The choice is it's down to the application.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I could do this with you for hours and hours. I don't want to take up, so much time. Thank you so much for, giving us your time to come on, just share with us so much good nuggets of information about ourselves and so forth. And I would like to just kind of wrap this up, to talk a little bit about your art, talk about a little bit about your coming up academy. I believe you're doing that in October, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I've got some new courses which will be coming out in October, definitely, on astrology, tarot, alchemy, and also, I also, for me, the academy's community orientated, and I love bringing people together. And people have made really great friends. I'll give you an example. I did a couple of courses. Well, I did 3 or 4 courses last year, but on a couple of them, we always set up WhatsApp groups, and there's a WhatsApp group is still running a year later, with all the people on it chatting, and they have Zoom calls and they meet up for dinners or conferences. And it's like, wow, bringing people together, that for me is a major aspect of what I like to do at the academy and just in my life, is its community building.
Yeah.
But otherwise, beyond that, I mean, I host retreats. I put a couple of retreats in Greece, which are booked now, which is very nice. I do light activation, sound therapy, water therapy, on the island of Delos, which is where Apollo was born and Artemis was born. And the academy is something which is very dear to my heart. And then, of course, I love doing private readings as well, astrology readings, and I still paint, a lot. I love painting myths, and I'm just painting my first tarot deck at the moment. I've just completed painting the full card, which is great. And I just did a recent painting of Donald Trump, the archetype of Donald Trump, almost as the orange man crossing the Delaware, and his brave martial quality, because he has Mars on the ascendant. So
well, I'm going to run that little promo thing right now, then we can look at it, and then we could talk a little bit about it. Okay. Sure. So let me do that. That was nice.
Thank you.
How did you come about inspired to do the Donald Trump Delaware painting?
Well, I see him very archetypally. I see him, it's part of his massive soul contract. I mean, I love the astrology because it stops it being personal. I mean, he has Uranus conjunct the Sun, conjunct the
Mm,
North Node. And anyone who knows astrology knows what that means. I mean, the North Node is what you're here to do in this life. The Sun is very much about visibility. He's in Gemini, communicating. And
mm,
Uranus, he's the innovator. He is the destroyer of the old. I remember, I'm not going to mention who, but a number of people very close to me, probably 5, 7, 8 years ago, said, "Why can't you just support the Republican Party? Why do you have to support Donald Trump?"
yeah.
And I said, "But that's the whole point." At the time, I was very clear. I was supporting someone who was from outside of DC. He had his own money. No, he was not bribed. And people are saying stuff. And, yes, it's a hard one at the moment. I mean, the biggest challenge for me, of course, at the moment is because the perception with things like Palestine and Israel,
Mm,
because there's the art of war going on. It's a much bigger picture and a longer term trajectory of ambition, of needs and aims. But why did I paint Donald Trump? Because he is a major player in this journey towards a better a better humanity, a more clear, conscious
mm,
humanity. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's perfect. There's no pedestal placing here. He's
mm,
playing his archetypal role as you are playing yours and I'm playing mine. And it's interesting because, of course, his detractors call him the Orange Man. And of course, that's why I love astrology, because he is orange and red, because he has Mars on the ascendant. Anyone who has Mars on the ascendant tends to be reddish in complexion. They also tend to be quite brazen, and don't really
mm,
give a monkeys, you know. And then he's also got it on Regulus. Regulus is one of the 4 royal stars. I mean, it's the heart of the lion. It's a
yeah.
powerful chart. He's riding a boat called Q plus. So this is some of my nod to what's going on a subliminal,
Mm,
alchemical, symbolic level. And of course, he's wearing a hat which is lightly cut, very subtly colored in as MAGA, because he's not just making America great again. He's getting the world to think for themselves. And of course, it's not just him. The whole team, the white hats in every other country, they're
mm,
having to work very cleverly and behind the scenes. Less so now, but up until really, I mean, since the Kennedy assassination.
yeah.
And 9/11 was a toughie because, of course, from what I understand, I could be wrong, a large part of the white hat operation in the Pentagon was taken out.
Mm,
From what I understand, I could be
yeah.
wrong. That's what I understand.
Yeah.
And it's like, it takes time to take down a Babylonian empirical system. You
Yeah.
can't just do it overnight or even in 1 decade. And
Right.
that's where I say to my European friends who just don't
Mm,
get it, just try and look at the big picture. Try and be open to some of the new history that's coming in and not sticking just to his story. History
right.
is written by the victors. Allow one's sense to suspend disbelief for a moment and open up to new concepts. It's very, very empowering and very healing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I really do believe Donald Trump was selected uh, a long time ago.
I do too.
In all the steps that he went through, being in the New York socialite, being a television celebrity, all that was part of
I do
the
too.
plan to build him into the society, if you will, to kind of meet these people and know the flow, what is going on, what
Absolutely.
was the actual swamp, and how big and how deep it really was.
You're very profound what you're saying,
Yeah.
Jeff. Again, it feels very right in my body when you say that, and that's
Mm,
also where we want to remind human beings. How does it feel in your body when you hear that?
yeah.
Because that's where some of the truth is going to lie, not just in the mind. The heart is 50 times more powerful than the mind. So, he had to infiltrate. This is a long term. And then, of course, you've got
Yeah.
the more history of John Trump and Tesla. John Trump and Tesla.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you've got, the Baron Trump sagas of the
Yes.
1880s by Ingersoll Lockwood. The list is long and
Right.
it's deep and it's exciting and it is engaged in time travel. This is much bigger. In some ways, with the Kennedy assassination, my
Mm.
suspicion is it was not just about the economic system. Of course it was, and the greenback coming in and going back onto the gold, silver standard and off the fiat currency. I think it was
Right.
also massively about reality and non-terrestrial life and who we are as a species, our DNA. And what was the last post of
Right.
Q is what's in our DNA. It's all
Yeah.
about the DNA. And I think there's going to be huge discovery in the next 5 years now that Uranus is in Gemini.
No kidding. Do you think we have already have some of this discovery? It's going to be
No, it's
like
all
let
there.
out.
It's all there. It's all been hidden, and it's all coming. And it has to come out in a way when humans are ready for it. If consciousness can't catch up with the technology, we are screwed. The consciousness has to actually be equal, or if not ahead, of the technology.
Now, do you find it trivial that when we had an opportunity back in the 50s with Dwight Eisenhower having the opportunity to do the treaty, that he didn't select, let's go out with the full, disclosure. Let's go with the group that we're going to really liberate the humankind?
So it's interesting. I've never spoken in public about Dwight Eisenhower.
Yeah.
And Laura, his great-granddaughter, is a dear friend of mine. I do not know the answer to that. What my heart tells me is in that man's journey up the ladder, like with all people, we have had to compromise at some point in order to get ahead. But when he made that fated special speech, he really was trying to help humanity. So for me, I don't know, because I think Mike King, for example, do you know him, the historian?
Yeah, I listen to Mike a lot.
I think he's brilliant.
Yeah.
And I know him and Laura have had a spat.
Mm.
And you see, for me, this is where we have to hold energy and respect individual stories between souls.
Right.
And Laura, I can still learn vast amounts from Mike King and still hold Laura as one of my special friends.
Sure.
And so, and I think this is part of the Christed light that we have to relearn, quite frankly. Because what is it about? It's about truth. And maybe Eisenhower did some stuff which was pretty untoward at certain parts. And King is more of a specialist on this. This is not my wheelhouse. But that speech that he made set the ball rolling for us.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, the power center was so dark and mysterious during the Second World War. It was so, I mean, it really was. I mean, let's take quickly, and we can't do it today. I haven't got time.
Right.
The inversion of the Second World War. And this is a question again, not a statement.
Right.
What did Hitler, Gaddafi, and Saddam Hussein have in common?
Yeah.
Well, it seemed to me they all went up against the central cabal banking system.
Right.
So again, there's a hell of a lot of stuff that's been told us, which may end up being a 180.
Yeah, I see that coming like an avalanche. Because, it's interesting that, we'll wrap with the last bit of this is that as a kid that grew up in the Far East, I viewed the World War II, the whole scenario of the Hitlers, very differently until I came to America. Because over there, my primary enemy that I was brainwashed to hate was Japanese. Because the nature of the Japan control over Nanjing as well as Taiwan, all those incidences, we were conditioned to use that as our catalyst to drive us to separate and then to be violent, And it's interesting that until I came to America and then the advent of the internet, that I do research, and I could not believe the level of corruption that the China, the communists, as well as the Chiang Kai-shek group, who was they were tearing up their own country without telling it. It's just like what we're doing here with the bipartisan party, tearing up our own country in America. Very similar. And I think now, because there's so much time that moves along, and along with your astrology charting of this, we are much more now savvy to what's going on, not being just go, oh, well, that's just the way it is, acquiescent, doing that. I think now this is the aspect of let's hear our voice. And
Yeah.
I'm so glad we have that.
I am too. And that accountability is so important. And our curiosity to create accountability and our ability to go back into our intuition. So when we do select leaders, and they're temporary leaders, there's no more gravy train of going into DC or London for 50, 70 years. It's ridiculous. You go and you do a specific job, ideally on the local level, and then you return home to the homestead, to the farm, or whatever it is. Right. It's a sense of radical localization and accountability. And when we have that, society is going to function very healthily.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, George. This has been an incredible time with you. I can't stress enough that what you have shown the world is something that is so unique, so special. I know there's very selective group of people that really gets this, and I think you're one of them. And for you to not just sit around and just go, oh, well, here's my talent, but you're giving it to the world. We thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for having me on your show today. I feel very honored.
It's just been a privilege and an honor to talk about everything that you've shared with us, and hope to do that again someday, because I just know we could just go further. But I am going to be part of your academy. I went through your site that just could not believe all the greatness of the stuff that you're offering. And I will have all the links down in the description. I hope everybody go check it out, take a look, especially support the movement, support the academy, and support the artists. Your prints are available in different sizes as well, right?
Yeah.
So there's that to help. And there's, of course, the tarot reading. We didn't even talk about that. And that's really close to my heart because I love tarot reading. And just all the great stuff, all the things that it's on your site. I encourage everybody to just take some time and see what resonates with. And with that, thank you everyone who's in the audience that stayed up late in America to watch this. And then, of course, this will stream at redpills.tv on Sunday. And with that, George, thank you again, sir. I wish you the best, and I hope to see you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Okay. Everybody, we will see you on the next podcast.
Well done. You've done something that most people only ever dream about. You've started and kept a business alive, and that's a huge achievement and one you should be proud of. Now, I want to help you make that business unbreakable. My name's Adam, and I've spent the last 20 years of my career leading, growing, and building companies and teams for lasting impact. Whether it's in the corporate world, a brand new small business startup, or a 100-year-old family business, I've seen it and I've led it. And what I've learned is building an unbreakable business often requires similar ingredients: clear financial insights, well-built systems, streamlined growth strategies, and optimized operations. Starting with defining your purpose beyond profit, we unlock strategies across every part of your business so that we can arrive at what I call asymmetric endurance, allowing you to get your time back while the business continues to grow, succeed, and achieve its true purpose. If you're ready to build an unbreakable business, let's talk. Book 15 minutes with me today at kingdommindsetstrategies.com.